Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be covering my interpretation of Megazoo for Special Booster 1.0, and Megazoo is a pretty interesting deck because it's basically just as it sounds. You're just playing a whole bunch of Mega level Digimon, making it very hard for the opponent to basically try to beat up into your Digimon, just because your Digimon are all Megas, and all of the Megas are going to have some very powerful on-play abilities, or just be very powerful Digimon in general, so it's going to be very hard for the opponent to deal with whatever you're slowly playing. But it's definitely a really interesting deck nonetheless, and I think this is definitely one of the better formats that Megazoo can be played in. So going over the deck really quickly, starting with the Digitamas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Cupimon as the only Digitama, just because he has this nice inheritable effect of if we have 5 or more security when we attack, then we get to draw 1 card. So drawing a card is very, very important for the deck because similar to Rookie Rush, Megazoo isn't going to be digivolving a whole lot, so we're not really going to be drawing a whole lot. So having Cupimon help us with our card draws is very, very important. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tsukaimon. So Tsukaimon is just a value vanilla rookie. There's really not much to him other than the fact that we just want a Digimon to digivolve Cupimon into, on top of which we want to have a few level 3s for the targets of one of our other cards that I'll get to in a moment. And then the only other rookie that I'm going to be running is 4 copies of Kudamon. So Kudamon is very, very good just because he has this when attacking ability, where if we have 4 or less cards in our hand, then we get to draw 1 card. So again, drawing is very important because we're not going to be digivolving a whole lot, so we're not going to be getting a whole bunch of card draws. So any way we could just draw cards is really, really good. And this combos really nicely with Cupimon because with Cupimon he could potentially draw 2 cards, and he is a rookie to play off of one of our other cards that I'll get to in just a moment. So unfortunately, I'm going to be skipping the champion level just because we don't really need to play any champions. If you want, you could add in 4 of any of the blockers, but again, I just don't feel like it's needed. So I'm just going to be skipping right up to the ultimates. So as far as our ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Zudomon. So Zudomon is really important because he has this on-play ability of drawing us 2 cards. And again, because we're not really going to be digivolving, we're not going to be drawing. So any way we can draw cards is very, very good. And then on top of which, he has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking, we get to gain 1 memory if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources. So gaining the memory is pretty important considering everything in our deck is super expensive, and we just want to be able to play our cards more efficiently. And then as far as the other ultimate of the deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MagnaAngemon. So MagnaAngemon is really only in here for his on-play ability of being able to recover 1. So we are playing a little bit heavier into recovery in this deck just because there's so many different cards that we want to have in our security, and there's a very high chance that another Mega is going to end up in our security, and we're kind of using our security as a form of removal because, again, when they see a Mega, it's going to be very, very powerful, and it's going to basically stop them from wanting to aggress onto our security because they're just going to be losing whatever Digimon that they're going to be attacking with. So being able to recover is very, very powerful because, again, not only is it keeping us in the game a little bit longer by having a healthy life total for not only just Cupimon, but just having a healthy life total in general. And then on top of which, as I mentioned before, we're basically using our security as another form of removal, so MagnaAngemon just works very well with the deck. Unfortunately, his inheritable skill matters a little bit less compared to Zudomon's, but it's still pretty decent where during your turn, this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP for every 3 security we have. So it's just DP boosting our yellow Digimon, and that's just not that bad to do. Next, on to the Megas of the deck. I'm going to be running 4 copies of Machinedramon. So Machinedramon is just the Mega blocker of the deck, on top of which he has the very nice on-play ability of de-digivolving 2 of our opponent's Digimon by 2. So the whole idea is because they're just going to be using a lot of their memory that we're giving them to just try to digivolve into a Mega just to try to deal with our Megas, and Machinedramon's really good just because, again, not only is he the blocker of the deck, but he also just de-digivolves the opponent's Digimon, so that way it sets them really far behind, and it makes our board state that much better and theirs that much weaker. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MetalSeadramon. MetalSeadramon is just another on-play mega, where his on-play ability is we get to bounce up to 2 of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So that's just really good because, again, if they're using the memory to try to go wide, then MetalSeadramon will just start bouncing them back to the hand and basically taking away all of the advantage we just gave them. And then on top of which, he has a very nice ability of during your turn, this Digimon can't be blocked by any Digimon that the opponent has without a Digivolution source. So if they're just raw playing blockers, then he's basically unblockable. But MetalSeadramon is also really important just because he is a blue level 6, and that synergizes very well with Omnimon, and we are going to be playing Omnimon in the deck. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Plesiomon. So Plesiomon is pretty good because it is just a value vanilla mega. So very cheap to play compared to a lot of the other megas, and very cheap to digivolve into, again, compared to a lot of megas. So he's just a good mega to have. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Volcanicdramon. So Volcanicdramon is basically doing almost the exact same things that MetalSeadramon is doing for the deck. His on-play ability is deleting all of the opponent's Digimon with 4,000 or less DP. So again, if they're just trying to go wide as we give them a whole bunch of memory, then Volcanicdramon just punishes them for it. And then on top of which, he also has a nice ability of having security attack +1, so he could aggress onto the opponent's security even harder than what the opponent might be able to aggress onto us. And that's, again, very, very good because it helps us win the damage race. And he's also red to play with Omnimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Phoenixmon for all the same reasons why we're playing Plesiomon. He's red for Omnimon, and he's a value-efficient vanilla mega. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Seraphimon. So Seraphimon is the only mega that we actually really want to digivolve into, just because his when digivolved ability is being able to recover 1. So again, the same reasons why we're running MagnaAngemon is the same reasons why we want this when digivolved ability for Seraphimon, because recover 1 is just really good. And then on top of which, he even has a nice ability where during your turn, if you have 3 or more security, this Digimon gains security attack +1. So as I mentioned before with Volcanicdramon, security attack 1 is just pretty valuable of a skill to have. Next, I'm running 3 copies of Magnadramon. So Magnadramon is really good because, again, it's another on-play mega, and it has a really good native skill of its own. So its on-play ability is if we have 3 or fewer security, then we get to recover 2. So that's just already pretty good because it allows us to keep our life total relatively healthy, and it adds cards into our security, so it makes our security that much more threatening for the opponent, and it helps keep Cupimon's ability on live, so it's just a very good card to have for the deck. And then on top of which, it has a nice when attacking ability, where we get to play a level 3 yellow Digimon from our hand for free. So that's kind of why we still want to play a couple of level 3 yellow Digimon, not only to digivolve off of Cupimon and to have Cupimon help us give some extra card draw, but because it also synergizes and combos very nicely with Magnadramon. And then the last mega of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Omnimon. I don't really know if I need to explain what Omnimon does at this point because I think everyone just knows what he does. Omnimon is just good, and he is a very powerful mega Digimon that we definitely want to run for the deck, and we definitely can run for the deck. And then in terms of our option cards, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gaia Force. So Gaia Force is just the most powerful removal option in the game currently. So we have a whole bunch of recovery effects to try to force it into our security, on top of which we do have a couple of red level 6s that we could just sit on just to be able to play Gaia Force. So Gaia Force is just a very powerful card of just being able to remove one of the opponent's Digimon, and that's the only real reason why we're playing it. And then the last card of the deck is going to be 3 copies of TK Takaishi. So the starter deck TK is really, really powerful for the deck just because, again, not only is it a very efficient card to play because we do need a couple of efficiency cards, but it is also a really powerful card for all of our security because during the opponent's turn, all of our security Digimon get plus 2,000 DP. So with 2 or all 3 of our TKs out, then it is going to be very, very hard for the opponent to live basically any security check, and it can ruin a whole bunch of different strategies, and it's just a very, very powerful card just to sit on. Now, there is a whole bunch of different ways that you could build Megazoo, and there's a whole bunch of different other cards that you could use that really complements Megazoo. That was just what I was running, so here's a couple of cards that you could think about running in your version of the deck. So if you really don't like the yellow base that I'm working with, you could swap that out for a blue base. So Upamon is a really good Digitama at helping you draw some cards. And then Gabumon is the level 3 that helps you draw cards. And then if you really want, you could also just run any of the value vanilla level 3s that blue has as well. You could also think about running any of the memory borrowers. So the memory borrower ultimates are pretty good because you don't really care about giving the opponent a whole bunch of memory. And then on top of which, you gaining memory just so that it will help make your plays and playing your cards that much easier is definitely something you really want. And again, the downside of giving your opponents 3 extra memory doesn't really matter because we're already giving them a whole bunch of memory anyway. So any of the memory borrowers are really good, on top of which they have a relatively low play cost compared to some others. So they're just even more efficient to play. And then if you want to play some other mega cards, there's plenty of other mega cards you could think about running. So you could think about running MagnaAngemon as the black vanilla. You could also think about running Wargreymon just because Wargreymon has both the blocker and reboot ability innately. So even without anything stacked, that's still just a very powerful combo of abilities. So that way you could use them to slowly aggress onto the opponent's security while you are also being able to have a blocker on the field. You could also think about running MetalSeadramon just because MetalSeadramon is an unblockable Digimon just to help try to close out games, and his other ability where he gains plus 2000 DP on the opponent's turn just makes him a little bit harder for the opponent to remove him. You could also run Rosemon because Rosemon is pretty good at punishing the opponent for trying to go wide because we're giving them so much memory by her ability triggering whenever the opponent is attacking. If she's suspended, then you get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon. So she really helps limit the number of attacks that the opponent can do, on top of suspending the opponent's Digimon, so that way we could then potentially beat them up and try to control the board state that much more efficiently. Or if we want, we could also think about running Puppetmon because Puppetmon has a very powerful on-play ability where we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon. And then during the opponent's next unsuspend phase, they can't unsuspend any of their Digimon. So this combos really well not only with Rosemon, but it's just a very powerful card in general. So with Rosemon, resting the opponent's cards down, Puppetmon just keeps them stun locked, and then they have to deal with your megas that are incoming. And then on top of which, Puppetmon also has a very powerful when attacking ability of being able to gain us memory, which again helps us play our cards and allows us to just extend some of our plays potentially. Then if you want to run a couple of purple Digimon, you could run Venom-Myotismon. So Venom-Myotismon is kind of doing what Rosemon's doing, just not really, where he has the ability to take away the opponent's memory for each attack that they're doing. So that's just, again, very, very powerful, especially in combination with Rosemon, because they attack once. If they have a field of Digimon, then you get to take away some of their memory and rest one of their Digimon down. So there's definitely a very powerful synergy and combo play to just some of the megas just sticking on board. And then on top of which, Venom-Myotismon also has security tech +1. So again, if you want to try to race and aggress onto the opponent's security, he is a fantastic card for doing that as well. And then if you're also thinking about playing more purple cards, then Boltmon is pretty good for the same reasons why MagnaAngemon's good. He's just the value vanilla mega of the color. And then if you're playing more into the purple and black side of things, then you could also run MillenniumMon because he's just doing this very similar job to what Omnimon's doing, where you're using the When Digivolved ability to remove one of the more powerful threats that the opponent has on board. And then on top of which, he has a nice on-deletion ability, where if he has any Digivolution sources, he basically just revives himself for free. So he becomes a very sticky card and very hard to deal with card. And then if you're looking at some other options to play, if you're leaning more towards into the blue base, then you could think about running Hammerspark, just because Hammerspark is really good for gaining you memory. And again, that's just pretty good to have. And then on top of which, it also has the nice security ability of gaining 2 memory, which effectively is taking 2 memory away from the opponent. So as they are trying to aggress with all of our other cards in combination with it, it could really make for a very devastating security check, even though it's not a mega. And then as far as other Tamers go that you could possibly run, there's a whole bunch of other Tamers that you could run, like the starter deck Tai, just for the plus 1,000 DP boost. You could run Purple Matte if you're running more of the purple engine stuff. So there's just a couple of others that you could use. I'm just preferring to highlight TK because TK is just a very, very good as a tamer overall. So he first memory fixes, which again, memory fixing is pretty good because it allows you to actually play some of your cards by always being at 3 memory. And then on top of which he has a very powerful on play ability where we get to look at our security and then reveal 1 card from it and add it to our hand. And then if that card is yellow, then we get to recover 1. So whether we actually get to recover the 1 or not, just the fact that we could still look at our security and add any of those cards to our hand is very, very powerful. And then if that card just so happens to be yellow, being able to recover 1 is just the cherry on top. So TK is just very, very good as a good memory fixing tamer for the deck. So for the most part, this is just kind of my interpretation of MegaZoo. As I mentioned before, you could play around with the different card choices and you could play around with the ratios. But like the whole core concept of MegaZoo is basically just jam out as much megas as you possibly can. Have the megas try to like synergize with one another to really just control the board and make it very hard for the opponent to do much of anything because you're just going to be going in and playing a new mega every single turn, making it that much harder for the opponent to deal with your board state. So I think this is probably one of the best metas that MegaZoo can be played in, just because the options against it aren't very good yet. But it is definitely a really, really interesting style of deck if this is kind of like what you generally like to lean towards. So that's kind of all I really have for this video. As always, I'll have the deck list down in the description below. And if you have any other thoughts or card recommendations, leave those down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you in the next video.